Hi everybody, Karen Roby here for ZDNet with Greg Nichols, talking today about robots taking the controls of some very expensive vehicles here, Greg. You did a really cool article here about this, and we talk a lot about robots taking jobs, and in this particular one, you point out that sometimes that's a good thing. So just start off here when that would be. When would it be a good thing?
Yeah. As you pointed out, robots are taking over all kinds of jobs. And however that makes you feel, I think one bright spot is that robots can help reduce risks to humans in certain particularly perilous professions. And a few professions I think are as perilous as the three that I wrote about this week. One is astronaut, tasked with exploring space. One is a ship's captain, crossing the high seas, the open ocean. And a third is a fighter pilot tasked with flying in war zones. And there are actually three experimental projects underway whose missions are to use robots to replace humans at the controls of all of those jobs.
Yeah, some really important professions there, Greg. And you mentioned flying in war zones. So expand on that for us a little bit, how robots could possibly be of help in this way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. We've heard of drones. Obviously, everyone knows about drones, especially military applications of drones. For 2 hours this month, though, a civilian airplane flew over Utah with no pilot. It was completely unmanned. Unfortunately, that project had the blessing of the U.S. Air Force. That was not like a rogue airplane flying away. It was actually part of the what's called the Robotic Pilot Unmanned Conversion Program, known as Robo Pilot. And it's a joint project of the Air Force Research Laboratory and Design Technologies, a private company. The actual apparatus, the robot, it's this kit that can be installed in an otherwise unmodified aircraft to turn it into essentially a drone. In this case, the team installed the kit on a Cessna 206, which is a very common civilian aircraft. And the machine, the robot, works just like a human would. It actually physically takes the yoke, the control stick. It works the rudders and the braking system. It controls the throttle. It also operates switches, and it can read via camera. It can read gauges just like a normal pilot would. So the installation here is considered non-invasive in the sense that there really doesn't have to be much modification to the actual airplane to install the robot and to have it fly the aircraft, including takeoff and landing. Now, the reason the Air Force is involved here, and the reason I alluded to fighter pilots, is it speaks to this transitional moment we're in right now, where we have a lot of this old technology that's being replaced by autonomous technology, but we still have the old machines. So the Air Force, for example, they have this massive fleet of manned aircraft, billions and billions and billions of dollars of technology. But increasingly, the people who decide how we fight wars are relying on strategies that use drones, unmanned systems. So with those billions of dollars of hardware at risk of essentially languishing in a desert somewhere, the Air Force is keen to figure out how to kind of retrofit that technology, or how to have a stopgap so that the existing technology is still useful with these evolving strategies. So a robotic pilot that's easy to install in an existing plane without much modification, and that doesn't require expensive conversion, is very appealing and is just the ticket. So this test in Utah was kind of the first step toward potentially putting robots on board existing fighter planes.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine, a robotic pilot. When you say that, you think about the pilot seat, and to have, a robot there and assisting with it, it's really, it's quite mind-boggling. And we're kind of still figuring out, what's normal and not normal when it comes to robots, Greg, and are common. So for robots to be involved using machines that were actually designed for humans, I mean, that's where it sounds like it's going.
Yeah, and that's actually, I mentioned this kind of transitional moment we're in, where we still have a lot of the legacy technology, but robots are increasingly important in how we're going to go forward. So you're seeing that more and more. And another space you're seeing that is actually space, is outer space. So one of the robots I wrote about this week is called Skybot F850. And that is actually a humanoid robot that this week arrived at the International Space Station aboard a Russian Soyuz rocket. So Skybot, Skybot has a look like an actual. It looks like something out of sci-fi. It looks like a kind of an advanced humanoid might look in your imagination. And it was built by Roscosmos, Russia's state space corporation. And what's interesting is that this dexterous robot is capable of performing complex tasks like, autonomously driving a vehicle, like a spacecraft, for example, or performing experiments. Eventually, it could even help construct structures in space, which is fascinating. And that can be done either with a human at the controls, or it can be done autonomously. And so you may wonder, why on earth go to the trouble of making a space robot that looks and sort of acts like a human? And the answer is that all of the tech that it's going to be using in the near term, while we still have human astronauts, was designed for humans. The spaces dimensionally were designed for humans. The controls were designed for humans to be at the helm. So you kind of have to create a robot that functions like a human if you want that robot to adapt. So Skybot right now is on the ISS. It just landed. It's only going to be there for 2 weeks, but increasingly robots are going to be important in space exploration. And one of the things that we're hearing about a lot is this capacity that robots might have to actually land on a space like Mars, for example, or the moon, and start creating buildings and structure and infrastructure for humans to then come and land and potentially settle one day.
It's just hard. It's hard to comprehend, Greg. It's really to think about. It almost seems like something out of a comic book or something from when you try to picture it. And you did mention too the high seas earlier, talking about ship captains now. Would the robots mimic or look like a human in that way?
This is actually one that does not look like a human. In May, a couple months ago, this ship called Maxlimer set a record, really, for being the first to actually deliver cargo without the assistance of a human, without a human captain at the helm. And the cargo it delivered, I think readers might be interested to hear about, is oysters and beer. It took them from Britain to Belgium. And again, no humans were at the helm there. The ship is the brainchild of a company called SeaKit. And SeaKit won this year's $7 million Shell Ocean Discovery X Prize. And the idea is to develop a custom fuel-efficient ship for infrastructure inspection and potentially for cargo applications. So Maxlimer navigates busy shipping channels, typically with a human at the controls, but then once it's on open water, it conducts the rest of the voyage completely autonomously. It uses GPS and a self-guiding system to be able to deal with weather and to deal with all kinds of adverse conditions. And the Daily Beast actually covered this really well this week. Maxlimer, it can carry 2.5 tons of cargo, which is impressive given that the ship is just 40 feet long. SeaKit, the company behind it, reports that the ship just completed the first unmanned offshore pipeline inspection. It was oil and gas pipelines that are under thousands of feet of water. And so it's thought to be the first time that a mission like that has been carried out without any humans at the control. But bigger tests await. SeaKit is eyeing a transatlantic passage as early as 2020. And as sailors have kind of always known, a transatlantic passage is the benchmark for whether you have the right stuff to be on the ocean. So we're going to be following that closely to see if a robot can handle the rigors of sea for weeks and weeks at a time.
Fascinating. And oysters and beer. I mean, what more do you need, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Greg. Well, we thank you for your insight on this. And of course, Greg's full article, if you want to learn more, is on ZDNet. Make sure you check it out.